Hello, everybody. We are going to get started because I know we have just a little bit of time together today. My name is Simone Figueroa, and I am the president of You Thrive Educational Services. And for those of you who we've not had the pleasure of partnering with, I wanted to share a little bit more about us. We provide proactive mental and emotional wellness curriculum to college students to help them manage stress, become more resilient, and thrive throughout their undergraduate experiences and beyond. And thank you so much for taking the time to attend our Lunch and Learn today on the topic of helping college students transform conflict. We planned this event months ago, but obviously this topic is very timely right now. And we're very excited to have Dr. Lynne Maureen Hurdle here with us today, who is an esteemed guest and an expert in this field and one of our key contributors. And with that, before I turn it over to Lynne, I wanted to just provide a little bit more background information on her. Dr. Lynne Maureen Hurdle, author of the bestseller Closing Conflict for Leaders, is a conflict resolution strategist, facilitator, TEDx speaker, and coach with over 40 years of experience. Lynne is known as the conflict closer, not just because she helps leaders gain the skills they need to dig deep and finally close the door on those conflicts that have been plaguing their life for too long, but also because she helps leaders bring conflict closer. By helping bring conflict close enough to examine the roots of it, the fruits of it, and the long-lasting effects it has on business and life, Lynne makes conflict less scary by helping to actually see it, get to know it, and be in relationship with it. Over her 40-year career, Lynne has helped people from Harlem to Hong Kong transform through a mix of different styles and methods. She brings a wealth of knowledge, experience, and her special Lynnergy to everyone. So with that, I'm so excited to have you here today, Lynne, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, Lynne, you're still on. There we go.
I caught it. Yeah, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I am really excited to be here, and I want to get us going right away because one of the things that I always start with is how we view conflict, how we teach students, young people to view conflict is really important because most of us have been taught to be afraid of conflict. And that enters into our relationship with any conversation around conflict. So okay, hang on one second. I want to share my screen. So for the first thing that I'm going to say in terms of conflict, you've got to pay attention to how you are entering it in your mind. So you have to make sure that what you're doing is setting up a mind shift. And what that means simply is that if you are finding that you are looking at conflict through fear, then you got to move away from that. And I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting to the slideshow. I know that's here, but let's see. Okay, here we go. You've got to be able to move away from it, right? So you've got to be able to say, I can experience conflict as an opportunity to understand someone else, to be heard, to share my opinion. So the first step in transforming conflict is to notice where your mind is set when you enter into the conflict and to really do a shift to this isn't bad. This is an opportunity for me to learn more. And when I work with students, I invite them to say all the ways in which conflict can be an opportunity as opposed to being a bad thing. One of the ways that it's an opportunity is it offers us a chance to deeply listen to one another. So I wanted to share 2 deep listening skills that you can use and you can teach. First of all, listening for feelings and values. Often we're listening for content, but really what drives conflict, what's at the root of conflict is how we feel in the conflict and about the conflict, and what values have led us to even look at this as a conflict. So in order to listen for these things, you have to listen first to what's not being named. We don't speak in feeling and value language. It's rare that we come to a conflict and say, listen, this is how I'm feeling, and my values that this sits on. That's not usually how it goes, right? A lot of times we can't even name it, but if we're really listening, we can hear that people may value family, they may value education, they may value honesty, integrity, right? But they don't use those words. But if we really listen, we can hear that that's what this sits on. The feeling that often gets thrown out there that's easiest to express is anger. I'm angry about something, but anger sits on top of a lot of different emotions. And a lot of those it's difficult for us to express. So things like embarrassed or ashamed or humiliated, those are things that you don't hear people talking about right away. We might hear someone say hurt. I'm hurt about something, which is good, but it's getting a little closer to the ones that we don't want to name. But we're really listening. What kinds of feelings are coming up for this person? So we listen for the feeling words said and unsaid. Listen for what's important to them. What we value is important to us. That gives you clues about why this is even a conflict for this person, right? I feel if I'm feeling like honesty, or if I know honesty is a value, a strong value for me, and I interpret your actions as being dishonest, then I may not say that right out. But if you're listening to the content, right, you didn't say the things that I know to be true, whatever the content is, we might be able to hear. We often can hear, right, what they value, and then name it for them. So here's what I'm hearing, right? That being honest is a value for you, or family is a value for you. Name it for them, and then do a check-in. Did I get that right? Is really important, because often in conflict, we assume we know what they're talking about. We assume we got it right. Do a check-in. Did I get that right? And then be open and ready for them to tell you whether you did or not. And if you didn't, you need to try again to see if you can really get at what you're hearing them say. You've got to listen beyond your comfort zone, right? If you're really going to get to what people are saying and trying to share in a conflict situation, we're going to hear things that can make us uncomfortable. And to be honest, what can make us uncomfortable in a lot of conflicts is when the person talks beyond the place to which we wish to interrupt, because most of us only listen up until the point in which we wish to interrupt, and that's often very early in the conversation. So we've really got to practice listening beyond our comfort zone. And what you want to do is feel into the point at which you are not comfortable. I'm really not comfortable with what they're saying, but I'm committed to hearing them, to really trying to understand them. So in that moment, you may need to take 3 breaths. One of the things that I teach around conflict, the most powerful tool we have is our breath and our breathing and the way that we control it. I grew up with count to 10, breathe and count to 10, but nobody taught us how to breathe, right? It's just that we're doing this. But really, you want to engage in what is known as parasympathetic breathing, which actually can change the way our organs function, that actually can give us space in our brains to really think, that actually can help to lower our emotional content, beneath our ears, so that we can hear. So taking 3 breaths is really starting off with breathing in through the nose to the count of 3, holding it to the count of 3, and then releasing through the mouth to the count of 3. So in the moment when you're listening beyond comfort zone, You can take those 3 breaths to give yourself the extension of listening further. Pay attention to your nonverbals. My mom said, oh gosh, you'll never be able to play poker. Not that she wanted me to, because everything shows on your face. Our nonverbals communicate things. So if you're like me and you do the raised eyebrow when you hear something that you don't really agree with, you want to pay attention to that. You want to have someone really check in with you and say, how am I doing on my nonverbals? I'm a person who likes to sit with my arms and my legs crossed, but whenever I'm in a conversation with someone that is a conflict, I'm aware that that type of action can indicate that I'm closed off to what I'm hearing. So I never do that. My hands are always usually at my side. My legs are not crossed. I'm really paying attention. And one of the nonverbals that I like to do is just to lean in a little bit, not in an intimidating way, but in a way that says, I really want to listen. I want to hear and try to understand what it is that you're saying. Continuing to listening beyond our comfort zone means that I'm going to ask you to just push yourself 1 point further, right past your discomfort. Oh gosh, do I have to hear any more of this? Yes, I can do it. I can listen just a little further before I jump in and speak, because really that's what we want to do. We want to get our point across, because we've been taught in conflict situation, it's about who's right and who's wrong, rather than what each person is saying, how that contributes to the conflict that we're experiencing, and what we can do with that information to move forward toward resolution. And if we can't get resolution in this conversation, at least we can engage in a conversation that really shows that we're listening to one another and that we are responding to what's being said, not what we assume they mean by what they're saying. One of the best ways to make sure you don't just jump in is to reflect back to them what you've heard, right? I use the skill of paraphrasing and teach that a lot. And it starts with a sentence starter, right? It sounds like you're upset about, or it sounds like you're hurt about, you're embarrassed about, or you're excited about, right? Because sometimes we can have conflict because we were so excited about something that we just expressed it in a way that caused some discomfort for someone, right? They didn't know where that came from. So it sounds like, or what I heard is, when I paraphrase, I never use the phrase "you said," because for me, if you're going to say you said, you better get it right. It better be what I said, not what you think I said or what you think I meant by what I said. It's got to be the exact thing I said. So when we say it sounds like, or what I heard is, it gives us a little distance because that's what we heard. And then it gives us the opportunity to, again, to do the check-in. Did I get that right? For them to be able to say, you're close, you're far off, or right on. You really got what I said to you. And now it's time to respond. And I want us to recognize the difference between respond rather than react. That's important. Most of us react in a conflict, and it's mainly because what happens in our physiology is that there's a very small window for us once we've engaged in a conversation that is conflict. It's a small window before our physiology takes over. And what I mean by that is, any of us who's ever felt heat, in the back of your head and the neck, you feel that heat rising because of something someone said, or our heart starts pumping real fast. So some of us get sweaty, maybe our hands get sweaty, or where our foreheads get sweaty. We tend to know the reactions of our physiology. And so before that happens, what we want to do is to give ourselves just a moment to think about what it is that we want to say. I'm not sure why silence or a pause is brings such a negative connotation for people when we're engaged in a conflict conversation, but it tends to. And it's really important for us to actually take that moment, take that time. If it's going to take you longer than you're comfortable with, then be transparent. I just need a moment to think about how I want to respond to that. Be transparent in that, because otherwise we get intimidated by the silence, or by maybe they're giving us a look, or that we were taught that silence shows that we're wrong or we don't know what we're saying. We want to give ourselves the moment to do that. So we want to be clear that that's what we're doing in the moment. Just got to think for a moment how I want to respond to this, right? Understand what you're feeling and why. Be in touch with what feelings have been brought up by what they're saying. We get very uncomfortable. We want to just let our feelings really rush in there and take over the conversation. But we have the ability to control them. And when I say control, I'm not saying stifle them. I'm saying understand, this is what's coming up for me. This is what I'm feeling. Oh, I'm sitting in this. Do I want to speak from this place of emotion? And if I do, at what level, right? How much do I want the emotion to speak for me? Or do I want to be able to say, no, I don't want to speak from that place, but I do have something that I want to share about this. The why could take some time of really sitting with yourself beyond the conversation. When I engage in conflict conversation, I'm always sitting with myself after, but I do the work. So it's my job to do that. But I think it's our job too, as people, to understand ourselves in conflict. Why do I do that? Right? I react rather than respond. Why? What's the feeling that makes me react? When I feel like someone has shamed me, then that feeling comes up, and I don't want to sit in that. So I'm going to react. Maybe I yell. Why do I do that? Because it was done to me. Right? Often the why is found in the people who first taught us about conflict. So how was conflict done when you were growing up, right? The adults, how did they do it? Well, that has an effect on us. So that's often where we find the why. Hear yourself. If you're reacting, can you hear that? Is that what you want to come out? Right? Is that the way that you want it to come out? That's really important, because if this is going to be a conversation, you've got to be able to hear not just what you're saying, but how you're saying it to the person, and recognize the effect that is having on the person. And is that what you want in the conversation? We've always got to be responsible for how we engage in conflict. And the truth is, we are not doing really well in that category. And if we're teaching young people about it, I have to say this, in all honesty, we've got to model what we're teaching. If we're teaching young people about this, then we've got to be able to help them understand that it isn't just a simple conversation. It's pretty much everything that we do within that conversation communicates something to the other person. So hearing yourself say what you're saying and how you're saying it is really important. And so that means you got to be tuned in. Practice a pause and breathe. When I say practice it, I don't just mean in the conversation. How you do it in the conversation can really be prompted by how much you practice it on your own. Just to give yourself, even if you're not in conflict, can you take a pause from whatever it is you're doing and really relax into the breathing and the breath, and notice the effect that it has on you? Many of us don't know how to do the calming breath. Many of us, when we do it, we really aren't paying attention to how we're responding in our bodies. So practice a pause. You don't have to be the first one out the gate all the time with the response. Pause, breathe, respond. own a bad start. We don't always do it. Hey, look, 40 plus years doing this work, I still have bad starts. I will own a bad start in a minute and ask, can we do it again? And I find that most people are generous because, number one, how many people take responsibility for not saying the right thing in the right time, in the right way? Most people do not. So own a bad start. Hey, that is not what I wanted to say. Or, hey, that conversation that we had yesterday, wow, this was happening and I really said the wrong thing, or I really spoke to you in a way that's just not true to who I am. So owning a bad start is a great way to continue a conversation that may be really difficult to have. I do a rewind. Hey, right? Apologies. I know I can't take back what I said, but I'd really like to start this conversation over. This isn't about, hey, you said something that I got to get off. I've got to say something back to and get this off my chest. This is, yeah, that wasn't a good conversation on my part, right? And I kind of want to rewind. If we can go back to when you said, or when I heard you say, rather, right? I'd love to do that because I really want to have the conversation, and the way we had it yesterday just didn't feel good for me in the way that I want to engage in a conversation around this conflict. And then remind yourself of your desire to have a meaningful conversation. This is so huge. What is it that you want out of this conflict? What is it that you want out of this conversation? Most of us just want it to end. I know that, but it can't just end. You actually have to do some work. You got to engage, right? For it to end, because what you would hopefully like it to end in is either building a new relationship, strengthening already a relationship, repairing a relationship. It is about being in relationship with each other, folks. So when we get into conflict, we've got to think about what's the outcome. Most of us are taught to be the winner, be the stronger one. Is that what you want? Or is it your desire to have a meaningful conversation? And if it is, when it gets tough in that conversation, your best hope is to remind yourself of your desire to have a meaningful conversation. Might be the best time to take those breaths, to take that pause, and to say to yourself, okay, this is about having a meaningful conversation. What do I need to do next? What do I need to hear next in order to have that? So I'm going to take a breath and right now, and I'm going to see if there are questions at this point from folks about what I said, because I tried to get you through as much as possible to do a foundational start. So if there are any questions from folks, I'd love to see what they are and give any answers. And okay. Oh, sure.
So, obviously a conversation is often a two-way street. So how can you try to stay present and really implement these tools when the other party maybe isn't having it? And I know you can only control your role that you play in a conversation, but do you have any advice or tips on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, as you said, right? Conversation, we can't be in conversation if there's only one of us talking, right? So one of the things that I often will do is to listen more and try to ask more questions rather than me be the one that talks so much. Just to listen, tune in. But I talked about body language earlier. Body language shows a lot, right? I'm not sure if this is the best time or day to have the conversation, but please know that I do want to have the conversation, right? I'd love for you to tell me what is it that is really that you're really being affected by. What have I done, right? What do you feel I've done? And this is to try to see if you can draw them out. And if not, then it's probably not the right time. It doesn't mean you got to give up. It just means that they're not ready to have it. Yeah. So I see some questions here. Yeah. What's the quickest way to de-escalate a situation with student versus student or student versus staff? So it depends on what your role is. So if you're the one, like if you've been brought in as a mediator, the quickest way to de-escalate, believe it or not, is to be able to sit in some escalation, meaning venting of what's going on, to be able to hear what the issues are. I'm not talking about name calling. I'm not talking about sitting through that. But often people in conflict, even when they're venting, will vent heatedly about the particular issues and feelings that they have. So hearing that as a mediator, then you can come in and say, oh, so what I've heard is you're angry about, you're hurt about these things, right? So they know they've been heard, and you can continue from there. If you're the person in it, right? Whether you're a student or a staff, again, I go back to, you've got to really be able, who needs it more? Who needs to be listened to more in this? Because sometimes we just go neck for neck rather than recognizing, you know what, let me first of all sit back a little bit here, step back a little bit, and try to understand what it is that they're really saying here, and ask enough questions to clarify, what do we need to talk about? Because conflicts tend to go all over the place because we allow ourselves or the other person to divert to all these different things. But to really direct in your questions to get almost like a list. Oh, these are the things. So let's start here. Can we start here and talk about that? Let's see, what else? How do you navigate leadership and conflict that is that is passive aggressive? Yeah. So depending on the way that they are passive aggressive, you really sometimes have to name it, right? One of the things that I see is that when I bring this up, you do this, right? And really what I would love it is if we could actually talk about whatever that's about for you. Like what's going on for you that you felt the need to do X, Y, and Z. Again, being generous in conflict, somebody's got to know what to do. If you have skills in this, you've always got to be the person who's responsible for using those skills. And that's a difficult responsibility because you have feelings as well, and you have thoughts as well. But if that other person is not bringing it to the table and you need them to, you've got to try as many skills as possible to get them to not engage passive aggressively, but to actually have the conversation. And then one more question. Do you have any tips on helping two students facilitate a conversation? If you're mediating, if you're not, and you're actually there having the conversation, inviting them and sitting with some guidelines for how the conversation can be had is really important. And to make sure that they are sticking with that, right? If you don't think that they can have the conversation on their own, then be the facilitator that isn't there to take over, but simply there to lay out some ground rules for how the conversation can go, and then to help them when they're steering away from the ground rules, or to cheer them on and support them that, wow, they're really doing well, or they're making progress. So I'll stop there. I hope that was helpful. You are welcome.
Thank you so much. You were able to share some tremendous nuggets of wisdom and actually, actionable items and tools that people can use in such a short period of time. And I see everybody's in agreement and feels the same way. And so thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everybody. I know we got a few questions. Yes, we will be circulating a recording of this presentation to anybody who registered. If you want to watch again or share with a colleague, feel free to do so. And if you are interested in bringing more skills like this to your students, I will share my email address. Please feel free to reach out. We would gladly have a conversation. This is what we are about, and we hope to see you at our next event. And thank you so much again, Lynn, for being here, and to all of you. Have a great rest of your day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank y'all for coming.